Hello, today I'm going to show you how to paint a bluebell wood, and I'm starting by adding the trees. I'm using warm and cool browns, which I'll put in the description, to make some of the trees look further away and to make the picture more interesting. So that's a rough suggestion of the trees. You know you're in the woods now. And the next thing to do is to mark out the bluebells. I've ventured to my garden earlier and tried to sort out colour samples of bluebells on the spot and came to the conclusion they were all very purple. So what I'm going to do here is just stick some purple in, and then I can go over it with blue. It's very, very weak, but just to claim the space. And then the other side of the stump, they sort of almost form a circle. Putting some more in. Not making a hard edge. You don't want the bluebells to look like a tablecloth. They are very random. And they're lipping round the tree here. And then there's some more in the distance. So what I want to do is just get very light blue on the brush. Very, very light. And then put some more in the foreground. So there's a difference between the foreground and the background colours, which all adds interest to the picture. Make it a bit weaker so that I can go over it again. Adding the areas of green that are easy to find. It's not all blue, it's very patchy. It's working my way forward. I want it to look random. So we've got the blue bells in various shades, the interesting tree, the tree stump, and then in the background there's lots and lots of sunlight coming through, so it's much brighter green. So what I'll do is change to a bigger brush. I've got a number 8. Use lots of lemon yellow for spring green. A little bit of sap green mixed in with it. And go up from the bluebells and just go up a little bit through the trees. And that's as much as I can do without leaving a lost edge. So I'll just clean the brush off. Go up to infinity. There will be some sky showing and some leaves to put on some of the trees. So I just want to claim the space really. And that's instantly bringing the bluebells forward. And there's sky showing through there, so I'll wipe the brush off again. This big brush holds quite a lot of paint. And just go back. Leave some white paper there for the sky in a minute. And again over here I've got 2 layers. I've got a background layer and then I've got a tree with leaves on. I'm moving further across, mixing more paint because I don't want all the paint to be the same. I've got bigger area here. All sorts of bushes and things, and I can go over the branches that I've put in already because they're dry. And it's still in shadow, so I can still go along with this slightly darker green. And then there's some very light green just above the bluebells, so I can put that in as a highlight. Sort of the green that's showing through under the foliage. A little bit more sap green and blue just to change the tones. Working my way across. So that's that sorted out, and you can instantly see now that's a foil for this area. Now the geese were not at the bluebells, I've added them. So I'm now mixing up all my colours together. Going across to show a different area that the geese are in. And I'm going to drop some yellow ochre into that just to warm it up a little bit, which will also help the geese look more white. So clean the brush off, dab it a little bit, and then just mix the colours together. Blue and white are always a good contrast for each other. I think we've all grown up with blue and white china. Just find lost edges. It's quite strong, the yellow ochre. Their feet are orange, so I can easily go over that. And what I've done is set a foil at the front now that it's leading you in to a certain point. So I need to get rid of this size 8 brush, which is too big now, and just gently find some gaps in the geese and put some colour in. I'm going in with a very weak green, and then I can go over it. It's all leading you into the bluebells. I've just put a little bit more colour on the bark of the tree, and whilst that's drying I put the shadows in for the geese, which helps define them against the grass and bluebells. I'm changing to a number 4 brush, and I've got lemon yellow and sap green, and I'm just going to add a little bit of French ultramarine to it, just to make it a little bit darker for the foliage that's in the shade. This area here is not just bluebells, it's other things as well. So I've got number 2 brush, and I'm just going to make random marks, and then get some water and soften them. So you can see there's something there, but you're not quite sure what it is. And then change colour to something slightly brighter and put that in. Do the same thing. A little bit of water on the brush. Just take the paint for a walk. Then back to the dark colour, so that you're adding variety. Got blue and purple, got cadmium violet and French ultramarine, and I'm gently mixing them. Again, more water. I don't want to be too definite early on. And coming forward a little bit with some blue, a mixture of the two. And then drop some blue on top of the already wet purple. I know it's very weak at the moment, but I want to build it up gradually. And then there's areas that are slightly lighter, where there's more sun coming through, sort of bleaches them out. So I'll put some in and then add water. Make a lost edge. You don't want it to be too defined. Now I'll come forward now against a tree stump where there's lots growing, but they're more in shadow, so they're darker. I won't make them completely blue because it doesn't quite look natural. You just have to carry on working your way around gently, but work on all areas. Don't just do one tiny bit, and you don't want to do any particular shapes. They're just growing completely at random here. So again, more water. And then over here they're looking much more light because the sun's coming through. So I could do just a swathe of them. And I'm not going to water those off. I'm going to leave them because they're in the background. If you haven't got Cobalt Violet, you could do this with Azilian Crimson and French Ultramarine. You can just keep mixing it, matching it, adding a little bit more purple now. Just going to drop it in, just so it breaks them up a bit. There's grass beside them. I'm using a small brush because I want to get a dappled effect. And the grass gets darker, some shadow here. So what I'm going to do is mix the green with some homemade grey, just to give a bit of variety. I've put the paint on, I've now just got water, and I'm just going to move it around a little. Because they're in shadow of the tree, they're a different colour. They're coming down in front of the tree, which seems to be on a slope. Let it down a little bit more, so I can come back and put shadows in. Then coming forward, but not to the other side of the tree. They're not growing there for some reason. So I now go back with a different mix of green, still lemon yellow and sap green, and put in, because they're nearer, some stalks and foliage. Just add a little bit of blue to that. Just let it bleed into the wet paint next to it. And then there's some definitely more green on the other side of the tree. I'm just going to mix it on the paper this time, just to give more variety. Every patch is a slightly different colour because the sunlight's playing on it in a different direction. And add a little bit more purple to the wet blue around the goose. Then go back again and put some green in underneath him or her. And it's all looking different levels and of different interest. Spread them out. Lost and found edges. And then to make them look darker, I can just add a little bit of indigo to the blue, to the French Ultramarine, and a little bit of the violet again, and then just put in the tiniest suggestion with the side of the brush. Get some water, just take it back a little bit. I've continued with that method and I'm now adding different purple. I've got some turquoise and rose madder, just giving a different hint. And what I'm doing is just putting one shade at the back, and if I want them to look a little bit higher, just adding more rose madder. Still going with a small brush because it is a dappled effect, it's not one lump. And you can always add a little bit of just the turquoise, and that'll find its own colour, and it'll make them look in clumps. And there's a lot of grass to go in a minute, and other things that are growing like ferns, but I want to simplify it. So mixing up the sap green and lemon yellow again, and just putting in lines, doing a completely different stroke than I've just been doing for the bluebells, just to make it look varied. Changing green slightly. If you're not sure about the green, you can always add a little bit of the purple to it just to tint it a little. 2 strokes just to separate the green. It's further away so you won't see so much detail. And the bluebells do look better in patches than just one complete area. So coming forward there's going to be slightly more detail, so just put a little bit more in. Go back and get some yellow ochre on the brush just to give variety. Separate the green out a little bit. I've got some wood to put in as well. Just make the brush very wet and just spread the paint out gently. Move to another area. Give it all equal treatment, but just keep on the move. And it's perfectly acceptable to go over the goose's shadow and its feet, because that was the whole idea of putting them in first. Just claim the space around the wooden fence. Now that this area of light green has dried, I'm just mixing the 2 colours I used, which was the lemon yellow and sap green, with some of the bluebell colour, and still with the number 2 brush, just putting up suggestion of bluebell leaves. They are huge. Make it a bit darker. Just breaks up the foreground a little bit and leads you in. It just leads you into the picture. I'm just adding a little bit of yellow ochre now, just to ring the changes. Now I've got to go back to this area over here, which they get very, very light, so I'm just going to use the turquoise and the rose madder. Let it down an awful lot and just pop some in. I think I might just use a little bit more rose madder on its own, just to give it a lift, and then lots of water. Colours are affected by the colour next to it. It's just a question of filling the page and giving variety. And just drop some turquoise in there. And then I've got a little bit more of brighter green, which I can add some yellow ochre. So I've now got to mix a different purple and start down here with some more flowers. Just a little clump of them. And they will show up quite nicely against the brown post here. Drop some different colours in. When I put the trees in the background, it will bring it all forward. So I'm now moving to the other side of the tree again, because I haven't been here for a minute or two, and that's quite in shade. So I'm going to make a darker green to go there. Very much in shade. Just mix the colours on the palette to get a dark green. It looks more in harmony if you can use what you've already got out rather than keep adding new ones. And because it's a shadowy area, it brings your attention more to the middle again. And then adding some French ultramarine and rose madder. Just keep bringing the changes with every shade of blue and purple that you can come up with. Because they are in shade, they actually look completely different colour. So I'll just feather them down a little bit. So I've got a lost edge. And as they come forward, the green gets brighter. So I'm taking the green into the wet purple paint and blue paint. Taking the foliage up a little bit further into the tree line. There's all sorts of bushes I've got to put in yet, but I thought I'd start with the bluebells. I can put some over the bark. And just coming into sunlight now, it's an even lighter colour in certain places. So I'll just drop some turquoise in, which is a good foil for any other colours that are there. Put some purple ones behind, brings the blue ones forward. I'm now changing to a number 4 brush and mixing up quite a strong green, and then adding some of the bluebell colour to it just to harmonise it, and going around just putting in a little bit of foreground grass and shrubbery. And then when that's dry, I will drop a few bluebells into it. But I want to just get the tones right. And if it all looks too green and it's too harsh, just drop in a little bit of yellow ochre and it sends some of the paint away. And add more highlights. Just drop some green in on top. There's some wooden posts to put in, which I'm going to use burnt sienna and Venetian red, and then a little bit of blue just to knock it back a little bit. And a highlight in the middle of a little bit of Naples yellow or yellow ochre, just something just to show it's round. Probably do it with yellow ochre. And then a dark edge, which I can do with the Paynes grey. I've got several other posts, so I use the same principle. I've got one here. Just make a mark. Ground isn't level, so you can take it down as much as you like or as little as you like, then put dark edge and a very light middle, and then some 1 or 2 branches going sideways. Do the same thing. And I could put some Naples yellow in where this is cut, and the same on that one. Just adds a little bit of interest. Now while that's drying, I need to do the back, which has got to be very vibrant because the sun's coming through. So I need a slightly bigger brush and more lemon yellow. And I'm starting with the line where they meet and just dropping it in. Doesn't matter if it goes over any branches, and a little bit more, just to give a kiss of sunshine coming through. Then wipe the brush off completely and make it dry, and just move the paint further up. Make a few tree shapes with the brush. Try and get them to meet. Now that's in the middle, so I'm going to have a little bit more this side of the tree, but then towards the edges I want a darker colour, because I want your attention to be taken to the middle. Just making odd shapes. So you know there's something there, but you're not quite sure what. And on this side it's still very yellow, but there's pine trees that are much darker, so I'm going to mix some of the colours from the other side of the palette. I just stir them up to a dark green and use the brush sideways. If you haven't got a big brush, you could do this with a sponge, an artist sponge. That'll do for now. And then when it's dry, I can put some highlights on. I've gone along the background and put in different greens to show the shape and form and suggestion of trees, and then made the foreground underneath the geese and in front of the bluebells a little bit darker to add to the contrast. I hope you've enjoyed this video and that you'll try painting bluebells yourself next week.